Hi, I'm Karen from Edible Eden Design, and today we're here at the Avondale Heights Community Garden, which is in the northwestern suburbs of Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. And this is a great spot to show you some Kikuya removal. And we have 2 garden plots here with some Kikuya grass running in between, but this would be much easier if it wasn't here for the plot holders because they wouldn't have the constant problem of keeping the Kikuya out. So Kikuya, like a cooch and buffalo, is known as self-repairing, but it's probably it's the strongest of that, I think. And what that refers to is with wear and tear in schools or widely used public areas, the grass can cope with bare patches being created by lots of wear and tear because the roots are down deep and it just recovers and grows back into that space. But this very method of reproducing itself means that it's a real problem to have in your garden. And so buffalo, softleaf buffalo, is a far better alternative because it only spreads by going across the ground, so you can easily trim it around your garden bed edges or lawn edges and keep it out of your garden beds. So Kikuya is good to remove, but one of the problems is how do we do that and avoid the use of glyphosate? Many years ago when I first started gardening, glyphosate was the standard practice to use. And then we would use glyphosate and that would keep the organic matter in the soil. Then we moved to excavation by hand or machinery to remove as much as possible, and we spot sprayed with glyphosate. There's also the option of solarizing with plastic. This can take many months and you can only do it in hot weather. So in winter, you've only got one way to remove Kikuya, and that is mechanical removal. We've got 2 different mattocks here. And what I'm going to show you is that it's really important when using gardening tools in a heavy application that you choose the lighter ones. And this is something my dear old dad told me many years ago. This is really solid. It's a great tool, but it's just I'll have to weigh it later and put it in the text, but it's just a bit too heavy for me. Much easier for me to use is this kind of medium-sized mattock or smaller mattock. It's got a nice sharp edge. It also, instead of having a pick at one end, it's got another edge that's quite good for getting into small areas. So, this is a really great, it's a Cyclone brand, an Australian brand. And I found these mattocks to be really good for my body size. So match your tools to your size. What I'm going to show you is to remove Kikuya, you need a space, you need to get a space to get a leading edge. So, we start by lifting it from one edge, like so, and we're going to peel it a bit like a carpet. Now these bits aren't so difficult because they've just spread into the surrounding mulch, so they're easy to get out. But as we go further along, so this is what we're doing here, you need to lift it up like a carpet and roll it back. So if you dig into this way, you can do that, but you have to do the hard work of breaking into a solid area. So it's much easier to start from one edge, or where there is a broken edge, if you can get one. Otherwise you have to break in, if that makes sense. So you see, this is the technique I wanted to show you, is that you bring it over like a carpet, and this is the easiest way to do it. You also occasionally find some curl grubs, the grubs of a beetle that eat the roots of plants, and so they're very good to take home for your chickens. Or the magpies might find them, got some magpies nearby. So you can see that this is quite a lot of work, and I was having a think on the drive over about what size of garden you would still dig by hand before it pays to get an excavator in. And depending on the size of your garden or your lawn or whatever you're taking out, you have to know your health and whether you're able to do this kind of digging. You can see how I haven't even done 1 square metre, so you can figure out how long it would take. I think from memory it used to be about like 15 minutes you could do a square metre, something like that, to get it all out. And this is a lot easier because it's growing into a previously mulched path, so it can be a lot harder than this depending on if your soil's heavy clay. So you've got to multiply that out and think how many hours you're going to be digging this. Short people like me are well suited to this work because we're close to the ground already. If you're a tall person, really think twice about this because you can badly damage your back or injure your back. So yeah, if you've got more than 20 square metres of lawn, think twice and get a machine to do this. We've had a rake delivered to us, so I'm going to show you what you do here. So you can use the rake to toss off some of the soil, but basically you're losing all of that organic matter and that amount of soil. So that's going off. If you're working anywhere, in fact, where you're going a certain, beyond 20 centimetres deep, you need to check with your local authorities as to what's underground. Now, I already knew that there was nothing dangerous underground here. We established that, but especially if you're working on a nature strip or verge garden, A, you need to get permission from your local council, but B, you need to do the specific checks to find out what services are underground and how deep they are, their location, because you really don't want to come across those. The worst one is NBN, because in my experience they can be a lot more shallow than they're supposed to be, and they're very expensive to fix. Here we've got a nice blankety roll. You can go a bit further, but this with this clay soil is really heavy, so I'm going to cut it off and make it a bit easier to get rid of. So we'll just chop it along the line that we've done, or we can rake it. And yes, this is generally what it looks like when we're nearing the end, but again, you have to go along by hand, or you can get what I like to call a Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs mattock or pick, a small kind of mining pick thing that you can get from hardware shops, which I don't have with me today. But yeah, you have to go along and get all those last bits out before you plant into this. So you have to really, really ensure that there is nothing left in the way of Kikuyu roots. It is a bit more, and that's where this thinner. Actually, I should have been using it on the edges. Sorry me. See, look at that. It's right underground, a bit deeper than I thought. So it's got to come out. Yeah, so that's where this thinner one can be really good. It's a lot easier to use on the edges. Oh, why didn't I do that before? Forget to use that end. A bit greasy, not so muddy, but yeah, you see how deeply it goes. And that's where wearing gloves could be handy, because it means you can take your gloves off to use the tools and put your gloves on to do that, so your tools don't end up so muddy and slippery. But when you're going to do this big edge again, you really want the broadest edge possible, like we have shown you.